This is a presentation on risk management. Anything that goes wrong will go wrong. This is called Murphy's Law, and it's very true for project management because projects are always in uncharted territories, and if there is something, a little possibility that it will go wrong, it will go wrong. What I mean by that is that risk management is one of those areas that are needed in every project because we're always going into areas that we don't know. There is a lot of unknowns as we start making progress, and there will always be events that have a probability that will impact on our project. As we start making progress, the idea is how we can then create the signs that help us understand those risks so we can make actions and stop before the risk has an impact on the project. Risk management then deals with the processes to identify, analyze, and respond to risk throughout the project life cycle, with the goal to ensure that the project will be able to reach its objectives. The definition of risk is the possibility of a potential harm that may arise from some present process or from some future event. Here the key word is possibility, and when we're talking about risk, we're always talking about probabilities. The probability that something may or may not happen, and if it happens, it will have an impact to the project. Let's look at our process where we have our inputs. We have the WBS project proposal, the log frame, sources of information that help us identify risk. We also include the project environment and historical information to look at previous projects and what was their experience in that type of environment. We plan by identifying the risk. We monitor and respond to risks. We check and evaluate our risk plan, and we adapt and improve our risk plan. Key outputs of these processes include a risk management plan, risk response reports, and improvement plans. Let's look at that in more detail. During planning, we involve the identification of and quantification and development of a response plan. This is the place where we identify all the potential risks and we create a plan to respond to them. In the step of doing, the risk response includes activities to mitigate, monitor, and respond to all the risk events. During check, we do risk plan evaluation, which is the evaluation of the risk management plan and response actions taken by the project. We basically say how did we do in acting on our plan to manage the risk. And adapt, we look for improvements on our plan, the actions to improve the risk plan and response mechanisms, as well as update on risk levels. Risk planning basically looks at the process where we identify all the risks on the project. The team can work and have a list of all the risks that they think may have an impact to the project. We quantify them so we can prioritize and have different strategies to each one of those, and then we develop a risk response plan. This plan includes roles and responsibilities and sometimes a budget because we will need to do certain actions and activities that might require some resources. Here's the risk matrix. This is our list where we can organize our risks based on the levels of probability, levels of impact. We also develop a risk factor that helps us set up a priority in which how we're going to manage and what are going to be the risks in which we're going to put most of our focus. We're going to discuss this in another presentation. The risk response step is where we define and apply some of those strategies to manage risk. We either avoid them, we mitigate them, or we transfer the risk. We also monitor the risk register to see if there are any changes. We monitor risk triggers or the indicators that help us understand when a risk is closer to happen, and then we respond to risk events. The risk plan evaluation is when we evaluate our plan. We evaluate how we did it. We do even risk audits to see if the strategies and the actions we did had the impact or were as effective as we planned. And we also try to understand if there are any residual risks. During risk management improvements, we update the risk log. There might be new risks, changes in probability, risks that are coming from previous risks. We update the plan. make sure that we have roles and responsibilities, and we also make sure that we still have a budget, and we capture our lessons learned so we can find ways to improve it. Here's a chart that identifies the relationship that we have with risk and the project timeline. As the project makes progress, probability goes from high to low, but impact on a project goes from low to high. Let me explain a little bit about that. The idea is that at the start of the project, there is a high probability because we have a lot of time ahead of us for an event. Remember, risks are defined with probability. The more the time you have, the more probability that an event will happen. But as you get closer to the end of the project, you have less time for an event based on probability to occur. That's why the probability will go from high to low. But the impact has a different effect. At the beginning of the project, if a risk happens, there is low impact because there has been very little invested in the project, very little has been built into the project. But when you get closer to the end of the project, that means that during this time, there has been a lot of investment done already on the project. A lot of elements have been built, a lot of the work has been completed. So if there is a risk that happens there, the impact is going to be much higher because you might have a risk of closing the project or not being able to finish it on time, thus creating a lot of problems with the project. It's helpful to understand this chart when we start trying to understand the probability and the impact on the lifetime of the project. So as we start looking at our risk register, we try to understand how much time I have in the project, where I am, and what's going to be the impact depending on the amount of investment I already made on the project. Thank you for your attention.